Hello and welcome to Home Media Minefield Presents Let's See What's Out There, a weekly video stream and podcast currently focused on Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, which is available to watch on Paramount Plus. My name's Keith Isles, and as ever I am joined by
Pete Mealy.
And we are both film and television enthusiasts. And in today's episode, we are going to have a spoiler-filled conversation around episode 4 of season 2, titled Among the Lotus Eaters, which I believe is from Homer's The Odyssey. I think.
Is that what it is?
I think so. I'm sure I saw something about that when I was doing a tiny bit of research, but of course I can't find it now.
That's right. Yep, you're
Cool.
right.
Yeah, and it is to do with losing one's mind, I think.
Yeah.
Kind of forgetting, yes. Very, very thematic with today's episode of Star Trek. So we will be having a spoiler-filled conversation about that. If you're new here, then welcome. Please do check out the channel. If you like what we do, consider giving us a thumbs up, subscribing to the channel, and if you hit that bell icon, you'll get notified as and when new content drops. It's not just Star Trek Strange New Worlds that we cover on this channel. We also cover other film, TV shows. We look at different movies. We've just put one out actually on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, which is at cinemas at the moment. We've just done one on that. Plus, we look at physical media and home media reviews and things of that nature. So if that's your kind of thing, do consider checking us out. Would be really good. We do have a little bit of a loose format to the show. So just to warn you that we will summarize the episode, so there will be spoilers. We look at some of the behind the scenes. We check out things like Easter eggs and references, have a little bit of speculation as to where we think all this is going. And then we really get into our thoughts and nitpicks on the episode and get quite geeky about the whole thing. And then obviously we can tell you how to get in touch and whatever. But Pete, I wanted to ask you, I'm slightly old with this news now, but a couple of weeks ago, I just wondered how you felt about this. It's been announced that Star Trek Prodigy has been cancelled. And I know it was a show that you were very fond of. I'd seen a few episodes. The ones I saw, I thought were decent enough. I liked it. It kind of felt like the Rebels of the Star Trek universe in terms of animation. I certainly liked it better than the other animated series that's on at the moment. But yeah, I know you were a big fan and you'd watch them all. How do you feel about this, and what do you think might be the solution?
I loved it, and I can't believe they canceled it. I was reading about this a little bit, and I think they canceled it because it was bringing in, they geared it towards kids, but adults were watching it.
Right. Yes. Sorry, I realized I still had Mission Impossible up there.
Bum, bum. Yeah,
it's all about physical media. Yeah, sorry.
You just did your own. That's awesome. Yeah, I was really upset, because I think they had a great series on their hands.
Yeah.
And they'd already greenlit season 2. So I think season 2 was in production and they pulled the plug on it. I don't understand that. But I did read somewhere that they're going to shop a new home for it. And so I really do hope it comes back somewhere and people can also get to watch it, because that's my least favorite part about, the benefits of streaming and digital media is that we have so much available at our fingertips, but then when it's gone, they rarely, I think, do the physical releases.
Yeah, I have heard an announcement that it is going to get released on Blu-ray. Or should I say, let me just get that correct. The first season is being released on Blu-ray. Obviously, the season that they've cancelled, season 2, don't even know what stage of finished production that was. Obviously, animation takes a lot of time to complete. Whether they've pulled the plug and the episodes are completed so that they could be put onto a physical media or another platform, I don't know. But I mean, it's interesting, especially here in the UK. Picard was on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether Amazon could potentially be a home for it, but it is weird that Paramount Plus have let it go. But
like the gossip that I read said that Netflix was trying to shop it back.
Right.
And I think Netflix just got the Kelvin Star Trek films in the US back on streaming. So I saw that the other day and was like, ooh, hey, okay.
There you
I
go.
hope, I don't want to read too much into the tea leaves there, but hopefully it's a sign that Netflix will also have some Star Trek again.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff is to do with rights and whatever. And actually, weirdly, there is a connection between Mission Impossible and Star Trek. They were both produced at Desilu Studios in the same year in the US, and obviously featured a lot of cast members as guest stars and whatever.
Leonard Nimoy, right?
Leonard Nimoy, after Star Trek had finished, he did become one of the main cast, replacing oh God,
I'm not going to know.
Completely, no, Martin Landau. Martin Landau's character was replaced by a different character, but played by Leonard Nimoy, a character called Paris. And so there is a Star Trek connection to everything. Look, it's all connected. What can I say? Anyway, preamble out the way. Let's get into it and hit it.
I'm Pete Mealy, and I do the recaps. Pike and his girlfriend. Remember his girlfriend? Captain Patel, captain of another ship, who also prosecuted Number One's trial. She's here at the start of the episode. Their ships are doing a joint mission, so the captains try to spend some time together, but they're both busy, and then she doesn't get a big promotion, and Pike thinks it's his fault. So maybe they should take a step back. And that conversation doesn't go very well. Probably because she just gave him a rare pendant that he loves. Anyway, now the Enterprise needs to go to a remote planet with unique geological features that prevent most scans. Pike and the Enterprise were there a few years ago. 3 crew members died, and Spock almost died when a pre-war society popped up that they weren't expecting. But now satellite photos show a Starfleet Delta, so they're rushing back to try to correct the Prime Directive violation. They're looking to be a bit more discreet this time, so they assemble a crew and get ready. But right before they leave, Ortegas, who had been looking forward to the away mission, has to stay on the ship to navigate a complex debris field around the planet. Pike, La'an, and Dr. Mbenga show up with only their subdermal translators, some costumes, and a readiness to fight. But stuff goes sideways quickly with the most annoying high-pitched shriek that lasts forever. Now La'an can't remember stuff, and they show up at the palace that it was showing the Delta, and the guards have phasers, and then they get surrounded and arrested. They get brought before the king, who was one of their former crew, who actually didn't die, but he is angry because the planet makes you aggressive or something. So he wants to hurt the Enterprise crew. Now everyone gets to hear the annoying high-pitched shriek, and everyone can't remember things. No one on this planet can remember much. They have tattoos and clothes to know what their name and their jobs are, but only the people who live in the palace get to regain their memories. Back on the ship, the same annoying sounds, and the crew's forgetting what they do and who they are, and it's a mess. Pike works with a local, develops their better instincts, and convinces them to stand up for their own happiness and to fight for their memories. Pike still has the necklace Batel. Remember Batel? Probably not with all the high-pitched noises, but anyway, she gave him a necklace, and he knows it means something, but isn't sure what. So they go back to the palace and regain their memories, good and bad. Back on the Enterprise, Ortegas figures out that she should fly the ship just in time to not get crushed by the debris field. Now everyone is back on the Enterprise and everything is solved, I guess. Pike contacts his girlfriend and says he made a mistake. He wants to fight for the good and the bad, so they stay together. The end.
Very good. Well remembered. Right, let's just have a look at the production credits on this one and make it so. Right, so this week's episode, weirdly, I've got a very tenuous link to some of the production of this week's, because Eduardo Sanchez, who directed this episode, I actually was 2 years behind him at film school in Florida back in the day, and I didn't particularly know him. I knew the other Blair Witch guys a little bit better, Daniel Myrick and Greg Hell, who were also at Haxon Films back in the day doing that. But it's really good to see someone that went to the same film school as me actually have a proper career in the industry. So I'm both impressed and envious. But yes, Eduardo Sanchez directed this. I think did a great job, but we will get into all of that. So his previous work, as I've already mentioned, was his breakthrough was in 1999. After his University of Film School, he did the Blair Witch Project, which I probably don't need to say any more than that. Obviously, that was massive. One of the biggest independent feature films of all time. It relaunched the found footage craze, and did very, very well. Very, very good case of using the then pretty new internet to market not only the film but the myth behind the film. So from that, he went on to do more horror. He directed VHS, one of those movies there, and then kind of got into TV in 2000s. He started off with the TV series. He did 4 episodes of Intruders. Then in 2014, he worked on the From Dusk Till Dawn TV series. Did an episode of Taken TV series, as well as a couple of episodes of Lucifer. Did the In Between TV series. Supernatural, directed a few episodes of that. Nancy Drew did an episode of that. American Horror Stories, back to his horror roots. He did 1 episode of that in 2021. He's done Yellow Jackets, Charmed, CSI Vegas, Fantasy Island, FBI International, and now this is his first episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So as I said, really glad to see him move on to do these things. And also, I have to say, we will get into it, but I was quite impressed with some of the elements of how this was directed. So a good job there by director Eduardo Sanchez. Writing credits go to Kirsten Bayer and Davy Perez. Kirsten, we've talked about before, because she was involved in Star Trek Discovery. She'd worked on back in the 90s, some of the Star Trek Voyager novels as well, and done some stuff for that. But basically got involved with writing 2 of the episodes of the short treks back in 2018, and then wrote and was a staff writer on 30 episodes of Star Trek Discovery, as well as a story editor on Star Trek Picard, and now, as I said, has written this episode of Strange New Worlds. And Davy Perez, in terms of credits, again, they go back to producing work as well as some writing work. He's done work on American Crime as a staff writer between 2015 and 16 on that. And was also a story editor on 52 episodes of Supernatural. before coming on to Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So he's done quite a bit of work there. And looking at our guest stars for this week, I know there were a few, but the one we'll highlight playing the role of Zach, Yeoman Zach, I guess, is David Hyan, which I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly and not totally butchering it. But acting credits for David go back to the late 90s, where he was in The Adventures of Shirley Holmes, playing a werewolf in 3 episodes of that. Then went into the TV series Invasion, 2 episodes of that. Worked on Cold Case, ER, All About Dad, Without a Trace, Jack and Jill. Worked on Big Bang as Charlie, Chinatown Squad, which was a TV movie, playing the role of Fong. Also has worked on, there's a load of short films, which nobody will know those. Modern Romance TV series. TV series Kevin Probably Saves the World, a couple of episodes of that. But in terms of a more regular role, also, a guest star on the Magnum PI TV series, but The Sinner, and 6 episodes of that series before this episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So again, good bits and pieces there from the people that make it so. So, Pete, there you go. But there you go. I think you had a connection to someone in Star Trek Picard's first season.
That's right. I went to school with Amir Vaughn, who was in Star Trek Picard season 1.
There you go. And my connection is a very loose connection to Eduardo, but yeah, I did know of him. I saw him around a few times when they did early screenings of Blair Witch and whatever, and yeah, so there you go. Somebody made it to the other side, awesome. Which is always good to see. Right, on that note, time for a bit of fun and time for something to drink. So, I mean, this whole episode was kind of an Easter egg in itself, wasn't it? But was there anything specific that jumped out to you, Pete?
I might have missed the Easter egg as a whole.
Okay.
I look forward to you telling me what I missed.
Right.
The one thing that I caught was ease their pain. Dr. Mbenga at one point says, I know how to ease her pain. And isn't that what Saavik says in Star Trek 5?
Oh,
like, he wants to ease their pain?
Yes, absolutely. He does. Cybok,
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I hadn't picked that one up. So, well, nice one. Any other bits and pieces that?
No, that's really the one that I saw. What did I miss? Now I'm shocked.
Okay, so obviously, Strange New Worlds is primarily a prequel series, and we obviously always talk about the problems that come with a prequel series. But this episode, interestingly, is actually a sequel to the mission that they mention in The Cage, the very first pilot of Star Trek, which obviously we saw bits of in the Menagerie. And in The Cage, Pike was very different to the Anson Mount Pike. He was towards the end of their 5-year mission, and they had a incident on Rigel 7, which many of the crew members had been injured, and you even saw there were a few people on the bridge with bandages and stuff. And Spock actually has a limp when they go down onto the Vega colony in the cage. You actually see Spock limping and stuff. So they reference that in this episode, because this episode essentially is 5 years after the events of the cage, and they have to go back to Rigel 7, where they had obviously contaminated the planet by leaving, well, not only some Starfleet equipment behind, but it's discovered that the ensign, the yeoman, I believe, that he mentioned that he'd lost on that away mission, or that landing party, is indeed around. And that's why I sort of picked that character to look at the actors' work on. So yes, I've managed to. I really found it hard to find any pictures, but I managed in the cage, and later through visions in the menagerie, we do see Pike's fight with one of the inhabitants of this planet, Rigel, one of the sort of primitive warriors in that. So we see him having a fight, and we see him having a fight in front of basically a castle, which is the kind of the set. They've used the same sort of look that they had in the original episode there. The other little reference that I noticed was when Una, number one, she says to Ortegas, I flew the Enterprise before you did, when she has to sit in the con chair. And obviously, of course, she wasn't only number one in the cage, but also the helms person in that episode. I got a little shot that I managed to find from it there. And one thing that is less of a reference and more of a mistake, I think, is when Una's talking about the people they lost in the away mission, the landing party on that previous mission to Rigel 7. They've got the records of the Starfleet crew there, but they're actually wearing the current uniforms that they have in this series of Strange New Worlds, where really they should be wearing the high collar versions that we saw in season 2 of Discovery. And again, I tried to find a picture. It's a little bit small there, but there's a picture of actually number one sat at the helm, and Pike and Spock wearing those. They're the correct colors, but they're obviously a slightly different design uniform. So I don't know whether that was a mistake. I don't know. I'm always looking at things like uniforms and gadgets and stuff like that for continuity. But I did notice that. But those, I'm sure there are probably other references. But again, those were the main ones I picked up on. But it was the fact that the
callback to the cage.
Yeah, the callback to the cage, and the fact that they previously visited and had a mission on Rigel 7, which obviously they only stayed 4 hours when that mission went well and we went wrong, and we find out obviously that their memories affected in this after being 6 hours in orbit of the planet. So it kind of lines up, I guess, with canon in inverted commas, but
sure,
yeah. But it was kind of interesting that it was a sequel episode. Don't forget, we also got a sequel to The Cage in Discovery, didn't we? In season 2, there was that episode where they go back to the what's it called, the Vega colony or whatever.
I thought it was Talos.
Talos, yes, Talos 5 or whatever it is,
4.
where the Talosians and whatever. But we had sort of a reimagined sequel, didn't we, to that as well? And I think they even showed clips of Jeffrey Hunter and everything in the previously on Star Trek.
They did,
yeah. So I thought that was interesting, but that was sort of what I spotted this week. But I didn't see any other really sort of blatant ones. So cool. Makes sense.
Excellent. Yeah, right. Good times.
All right. So are you seeing any lights there on the bridge?
There are 4.
I usually have nothing on this. Speculation. Well, we saw Pike this which was my speculation of last time.
Yeah. I turned it off before I could see the preview for next week.
Yeah.
So because I hate going in with that to this part. But yeah, I think that they've done some good character build out for some of the secondary crew. So I wouldn't be surprised if we now go back to, like, this episode was a little bit more Pike. I think, coming up they'll probably dig into that Spock Chapel thing a little bit more. Yeah, I bet that's what we're going to see.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like the fact that, bearing in mind this is more episodic, it's more, planet or mission of the week kind of stuff.
Yeah.
With some, character through lines. But I do like the fact that, like with all Star Trek, it's an ensemble and we've got lots of characters. We have like nine principal characters in this that we can sort of follow. But it is funny how every show, right from TOS, you normally had sort of three key ones. Like obviously in the original series, it was Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. In Next Gen, it was kind of Picard, Riker, and Data. In obviously Deep Space Nine was a little bit different in that formula. And in Voyager, it tended to be sort of Janeway, Seven, and I don't know, one of the others. And in Enterprise, it was definitely, Archer to Poe and Trip. Yeah. And obviously this is, I guess, supposed to be Pike, Spock, and number one, right?
I guess, yeah.
But it is good that they are delving into the, other characters, and we're seeing a bit more, backstory from them. Obviously, last week we had a lot of Leon backstory.
Yeah.
And this week we get Ortegas, which it's good, but it sort of involved everyone this week, which I felt like everybody had something to do. Whereas with the other three episodes, certain characters have had very little to do or not appeared at all. So, yeah, really good. My only speculation, if you like, is just, this is a bit of a deep cut here, but I noticed they've mentioned on several occasions, particularly around Mbega and whatever, the Klingon.
Did I lose you?
Sorry?
Oh, I lost you. You there?
Yeah. Am I back? Sorry, I've been having internet issues. Am I back?
Yeah. I just heard you say the Klingon, and
the Klingon War.
Okay.
Mbenga and Chapel, and I'm guessing Leon served in the Klingon War as far as we know, whereas obviously Pike ended up, sitting it out because they kind of jumped over it with the going to the mirror universe and all that in Discovery, right? And I believe that the Enterprise was not involved in that. So I don't know whether this is going to come back or whether they're going to maybe have a spin-off or something about the Klingon War, but it is one of those things in the sort of Star Trek history that we sort of jumped over a little bit. And I noticed it keeps getting brought up in the last couple of episodes, or certainly this season. It's something that's come up a fair bit. So I don't know whether, there's that's fertile ground for more story.
Man, I would love to see that. Right? I think the Klingon War would be interesting. I'd love to reach back into that a little bit.
Yeah, it was one of those, I have to say, lots of problems with Discovery, but that was kind of what I felt one of the big missed opportunities. Instead we got all into the mirror universe, which I know you love, Pete.
I hate it. Yeah, but yeah.
But cool. All right. Time to draw a line then, I guess.
Let's do it.
Alrighty. So this is really where we sort of get into it and what we thought about this week's episode and any nitpicks or whatever. As always, Pete, I realize I dominate a lot of the talking on this show sometimes, so I want to put it over to you first.
My nitpicks I'm going to break down into 3 categories, and I'm going to go. The minor one is Pike's quarters are ridiculous in terms of size and in terms of open flames. Right? Like there are candles. There is a fire pit in his starship quarters, and that is insane to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a far cry from his quarters in the cage, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just insane to me. Like it takes me out of it. I don't know why it's there, but it distracts me. And so that's why I think it's a problem.
It makes
because,
Picard's quarters look tiny, doesn't it?
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this Enterprise is much, much smaller. Anyway, so that's my minor. That's crazy. My major complaint with this episode, and I think I have already complained about it numerous times in the recap, were the high-pitched buzzing noise. That was the audio cue for people losing their memory.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot believe that somebody okayed that going out. I had to turn my volume down every time because it was so loud and so annoying and went on forever. I cannot believe that they made that choice. Like, and they kept going back to it. Made me furious. Furious that they did that.
Okay.
Hated it. Such passionate hate. Anyway, and then my like overall complaint is that like I get what they were going for. I think that they did it okay. I just it felt like it could have been done better, you know? Like I this was an episode I really didn't like. And I was trying to think of like why didn't I like it? You know, and apart from the ridiculous noises and Pike's quarters, I'm like, gosh, like, you know, the oomph and the message and like the story they're trying to tell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, no, I can't pick that apart, right? I feel like that's all quality Star Trek in there, and stuff that I can't tell you what was wrong with it, but at the end of the day, did I walk away happy? No. And do I want to watch this one again? No. And it was a big departure for me from how I felt the first 3 episodes.
Really? You see,
New World.
I find this so interesting because I'm exactly the opposite. To me, this is the best episode of the season so far for me.
Oh my gosh.
This felt like a kind of what you want from Strange New Worlds. I mean, okay, they were going back somewhere they'd already been before rather than exploring a new world. Okay, I get that was kind of, you know, but it felt like this to me did feel like a sort of normal TOS or next gen Planet of the Week episode. And it featured more of the ensemble. And yeah, I was actually, I have to say, I thought this was the strongest of the ones we've had this season so far. So really interesting. Really interesting.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I had also a little shout out here. I had a text from he watches our shows. The rabbi from another planet who's in Israel, and he's got his own show, and he's been really ranting about how he loved last season. I'm sure he doesn't mind me quoting him here. He loved last season of Strange New Worlds, but has had a real problem with the first 3 episodes of this. And even he messaged me to say that he felt that this episode was a bit more like it. So and it's interesting. But yeah, I'm surprised. Also, I'm sure he won't mind me. Graham was a little bit divided by who obviously we do. Graham Williams, we do the
a lot of the Marvel stuff.
Mandalorian. Yeah, the Let's Say What's Out There for Mandalorian, and he had a real problem with last week's episode, which I know you loved, but the time travel one, he or the alternate reality one, and alternate reality and time travel. There you go. This was pretty well done, actually, and I liked it, and I thought I kind of know what you mean with the sound thing, but that was the thing. It had that kind of, obviously Eduardo, he's had quite a varied TV career, it looks like, but obviously his early work was in horror, and there was almost a kind of eerie, unnerving atmos to this whole sort of thing, really. And it had a again, how intentional I don't know, but it had sort of a little bit of a Memento, Christopher Nolan vibe, because obviously that was about losing your memory, and he would have tattoos to actually remember things, and the older people in the colony had the sort of ink marks, didn't they, as well as the totem and whatever, to sort of remind them. And I just thought it was I worry about not remembering stuff, so I kind of like when the crew were going through this, I was like, oh wow, because what I was expecting, what it didn't do that Star Trek normally does, and I thought it was kind of a refreshing change, is there's usually somebody that it doesn't affect. Like in Next Gen, it would be Data because he was an android, or the Doctor in Voyager because he was a hologram, or a particular species like Guinan. When in Yesterday's Enterprise, Guinan wasn't affected because of her species and all this sort of thing. Whereas in this, everyone was even Spock. I like the little the detail where he couldn't read the pad anymore, and that's because obviously he had probably learned English after he'd learned Vulcan, right? So and also there was that thing about his character in the previous season, or it might have been Discovery, about him being dyslexic or having a kind of Vulcan equivalent or something, a learning difficulty when he was younger or something. That I'm sure that was mentioned at one point. But
that sounds so familiar. I can't remember where that was.
I just thought that was kind of quite nicely done, the way it affected everyone. And obviously the foreshadowing, like I kind of like the sort of blossoming romance between Captain Patel and Pike, but the gift thing was obviously going to come into play, in that, to sort of help him remember and all of this sort of thing. But I like the fact that he said at the end of the day you got to sort of trust who you are and all of this sort of thing. So I thought it had a bit of a Star Trek type message to it as well. But yeah, I didn't have a lot of problems with this one. I was actually quite happy.
Man, I guess I think
that we're on a different, because we've sort of gelled the same on a lot of stuff, but this particular season it seems that we're not, which makes for a better conversation.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting because I think you do come from an appreciation of horror that maybe I don't have, right? Because like horror is not one of the genres that I go to frequently.
Right. Whereas
Yeah.
I do, yeah, I'm a Fright
Yeah.
Fester, and
You go to Fright Fest. I would
yeah,
never go to Fright Fest because
yeah,
I just like I do not have that in me, right?
right.
I watch a fair amount of horror when it gets into the cultural zeitgeist. And like I will say, you have some amazing short horror films on British Isles, the YouTube channel that
Thank
I
you.
have watched. But like I will definitely say your babysitter short film like still haunts me. And I don't know how much enjoyment I've gotten out of that, but it has definitely made a mark on my psyche. And
Wow.
so I think that it's the same way. Like, I didn't feel at home in this episode. And maybe that's because it has this sort of underline of horror that
Okay.
you feel much more at home in,
Uh,
right?
on that note, actually, I find that interesting because obviously we only did a retrospective of the whole of the first season, and we weren't able to talk about each episode. But there was the one where
The
um,
Gorn ship.
there was the crash starship with the Gorn on, which was very much a sort of play on Alien. I thought
Yeah.
very much so, and I just want because I love that episode, but I wondered how you felt about that one then.
So that was one that I liked, but I mean, I liked it because of things it did where, like it, that's the one where we lost Hemmer, right?
Yeah, which I still wish he was
But
in this show, but there you
I
go.
still wish he was in the show.
Yeah,
But I will say, like, they used stakes effectively there,
they did.
right?
Yeah,
And so I
for a
was really
prequel show.
appreciative of that
Yes.
because a lot of the other episodes don't use stakes efficiently, where they try to put Uhura or uh, Spock in mortal danger, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no, like not what happens.
No.
And I also thought that it played with like the Gorn backstory well, but have I rewatched it? No, and it probably won't. Right?
All right.
Uh,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Fair enough. But with this one, what was the other thing I was going to say? Yeah, because I don't really think they played into this much, but then of course they couldn't really because everybody was forgetting everything. But like I like the bit where Una and Pike, she pulls him up on that thing he does about relationships and how he kind of pulls away. But I'm wondering if part of that as a character is to do with the fact that he knows he's only got another 6 or 7 years left, because obviously he knows what his eventual fate is, thanks to Discovery.
Yeah.
But in Klingon time crystals and whatever. But yeah, I wonder whether that's kind of one of the reasons he doesn't embrace the relationships.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's part of it that was a little bit missing for me, right? Like I would have loved to have seen that, because I feel like they played with Pike's mortality fears a little bit more in season 1, and I thought that was fine. We didn't get into it here in season 2 yet. I think part of it that takes me out of it is Captain I've forgotten her name now. Bland? No. His girlfriend Battelle. Thank you. Was like a prosecutor one week. Now she's the captain of a starship this week. And I was like, this feels very like shoehorned in. But if they had done it more around that, I think that would have been really good. Yeah. Those are the things that like I just wish were a little bit more. Yeah. And I guess like I can't really point to those things for episodes 2 and 3 where I say like, gosh, I wish this had been a little bit more different or more or other. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'm just trying to think. Oh, I did roll my eyes when they woke up and said, "Oh, we're in a cage."
Oh, that one rolled right over my head.
I did think that was quite funny, but yeah. One of the things, if I have to nitpick,
yeah,
one of the things I don't like, and this is kind of a general thing about the show, or certainly this season, well, actually, and last season, come to that, and it was particularly kind of distracting in this episode for me, is much as I like the character of Ortegas, what I don't like is her snarkiness to command. I mean, I know it's done for a little bit of comic relief and whatever, but
yeah,
there's a few times now where she talks to Spock, who's obviously a senior officer compared to her, and she almost like sounds like she's back chatting and disrespecting him a little bit. And I know it's part of the character because obviously she got pulled up a bit for that in the 10th episode of season 1 by Pike. But yeah, some of the quippiness and snarkiness feels very like it's trying to be a Marvel show rather than a Star Trek show when they do that.
Right.
It's in the writing kind of, and the same with Spock. I know this is a younger Spock, but they've still, I don't know, sometimes they make him look a bit of a buffoon. I really didn't like I know we're going back to the first episode of this season now, but the whole I want the ship to go now, or whatever, that just felt totally out of character to me, even for a young Spock that's still dealing with his, humanity side and whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I just think that the character's smarter than that. And that just didn't feel right. It's almost like it's done to be sort of cool or something, and I'm not sure I like it. So it's totally very much a new Trek kind of thing.
Yeah. I think you're right. I hadn't noticed the Ortega snarkiness as much, but now that you mention it, I'm like, oh yeah.
She says something. He says something like, I can't remember the exact line, but it's something like, "Are you sure you can, navigate through that ash?" And she goes, "Now you're being offensive," which I get the sentiment of the line, but I just think, oh, would you really speak to the person in command like that? I don't know. It's a little nitpick of mine.
I don't know. I guess, I could see Geordi saying, like season 1 Geordi saying to Riker, right?
Yeah.
Don't insult my talents, like that, which would be very much in his character.
Yeah.
But it would have been played a little bit nicer, right? So
yeah.
I think that might just be, that might be an unfortunate side effect of current cultural and speaking norms bleeding into current writing, Yeah.
Yeah.
But interesting point. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's not too bad. It's not, like major distracting, but it's just one of those things that sometimes feels a little bit jarring and pulls me out of it a little bit. But but this is supposed to be about nitpicks, right? So
true.
Anything else you want to say, or any other points you've got about this particular episode?
Just checking my notes. I think I covered everything I wanted to complain about in detail.
Right. Well, in that case, we get to the fun bit with our. Now, you've actually been ranking these higher than me so far, haven't you?
I've been ranking them in the higher quadrant, or the higher half. Yeah. I think that, I don't know, I'm torn. I guess I'm going to give this episode a lieutenant.
Wow.
It wasn't, I think, as bad as some of the new Trek we've seen in recent years. But I don't think it was as good as a lot of new Trek can be. And that's just my feeling. Yeah, so I'm going to call it a lieutenant.
Okay. Well, last week's episode, I gave a lieutenant commander, but I'm going to stick by what I'm saying, that for me, this has been the best one. So I'm going to give this a commander.
Which is, I think, what I gave last week's episode. Yeah. So
not quite perfect enough to get a captain.
No, I agree. Yeah.
But I thought that this felt like a decent episode of Star Trek to me. It was about, you had your sort of A and B stories going on, and it was about something. And yeah, I kind of...
You were on a planet, you dealt with the cultural things, and that stuff had a tie-in that is still relevant today, right? Like, what are you going to fight with? What are you going to hold on to, right?
Yeah.
And what's important to you?
Yeah.
And do you give up on stuff just because it's easy, or do you go in and get the whole thing? Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, let's just open a channel.
All right. If you are watching this on YouTube, feel free to subscribe to the podcast version, LSWOT cast on all good social medias, or you can send us an email and let us know your thoughts, lswotcast@gmail.com. I've been Pete Mealy. You can find me around online. And Keith, where can people find more of you and your work?
Yeah, well, as I said, please check out more on this channel and consider liking and subscribing and stuff. I've also got a playlist where I look at the Star Trek films and some of the series on physical media and do a review on that. So please check that out. We also have a sister show which looks at Star Wars The Mandalorian, which I host with the aforementioned Graham Williams on that one. You can find the films Pete was talking about on my other YouTube channel, which is British Isles. It's EYLES. That's in my last name. And there's some short films there called The Urban Chiller Tales. Yes, please check those out. That would be appreciated. And I do want to give a special shout out to Neil Myers, who does the theme music for this. His work can be found at neilmyersmusic.com. Cool. Excellent. Well, that just leaves me to say thank you, Pete.
Thank you.
We'll be back next week to look at another episode. And
looking forward to it.
Yeah. And if you've got any comments, please put it in the section below. But otherwise, we shall see you next time on
Let's See What's Out There.
Bye for now.